So it's that time. We got to talk about the Golden State Warriors because the worst case scenario that could happen for this franchise is actively happening. Now, I'm pretty sure most people remember beginning part of the season, first 15 games, the Warriors were one of the best teams in the NBA. 12-3 record, didn't have to over-rely on Steph and Curry. Buddy Hield, perfect replacement for Klay Thompson, especially for the amount of money he was getting paid. But more importantly, the identity of this team was going to be defense. Looked like a really solid defensive unit, especially when Kuminga was in the starting five. And if everything wasn't going to pan out offensively, because there was a lot of fake shooting early on in the season, defensively, they were going to be able to hold their own and still win games based off of what they produce on that side of the floor. However, here we are now, and since then, the Warriors have been an utter complete joke. Because since then, they played 29 games, of which they have only won 10 of them. They have a miserable offensive rating of 109.5, a defensive rating nearing 115, and a net rating of minus 5.3, all of which are bottom 10 status within this 29-game sample size. They've been that bad. And to make matters worse, the way that the Warriors are losing games is exactly how they lost it last year. The Warriors come out looking really, really good, have a massive lead, but then end up just losing it by the end of the game. They had a 17-point lead against the Spurs back in November, an 18-point lead against the Nets again back in November, a 12-point lead against the Nuggets in December, and just a couple of games ago, they went into halftime with a 65-48 lead against the Sacramento Kings, just for them to lose that game to Sacramento 123-117. Basically, the same thing that they were doing last year. So what exactly is going wrong? Well, basically everything. Remember that Buddy Hield shooting stretch in the beginning part of the season that I really questioned if it was real or not? Come to find out, it wasn't. Since the start of the season, Buddy Hield has gotten worse from behind the arc every single month. Back in October, November, he was shooting 50 and 41% from three, but now in December, it dropped all the way down to 30.5%, and so far this month, he's shooting around 32% from three. So all that hubbubaloo about Klay Thompson not really panning out, come to find out, you're just doing nothing more but playing another version of Klay Thompson. To be fair, not the same amount of money that Klay was looking for, but I mean, damn, it's effectively the exact same thing. What also is going wrong? Well, the young players are not panning out either. Remember all offseason how the Warriors decided to not trade any of their young players, in particular B-Pods and Kuminga, because they believe they were the future? Why are you going to leverage something that's going on now to properly prepare yourself for the future? All that stuff? Yeah, that's not working out either. B-Pod still isn't aggressive. He barely looks at the rim. He's actually missed some games as well, but even when he is playing, that's not really panning out. Kuminga has shown a lot of flashes and promises, but that's effectively been the story of Kuminga over the past 2 years. But more importantly, because of Kuminga's inability as a shooter, it doesn't really make any sense for him to be in a starting five, so he's still coming off of the bench, and same can be said about B-Pods. So the two young players that practically everyone in the league at least thought about having on their roster, their value has gone down, and essentially at this point, they're just bench players for this team, which is crazy because then that brings us to the rest of the starting five, and Steve Kerr is just trying to pull a rabbit out of his hat every single time a game starts because he doesn't know what lineups he's going to go with. The amount of consistent small ball lineups that this team still has to rely on, and no, I don't mean not playing a five, I'm talking about playing three guards on the perimeter pretty consistently is something that this team just has to do night in and night out. Now, you may be wondering, well, what about the Dennis Schroeder trade? They did trade DeAnthony Melton, who basically wasn't giving them anything. Matter of fact, not basically. He wasn't giving them anything because he was going to be sidelined for the totality of the year, and Dennis Schroeder out in Brooklyn was playing really, really great basketball. What exactly is he doing so far with the Warriors? Well, he ain't really playing that well. Since Dennis Schroeder has been in the team, he has been started into the starting five, and in these 19 games in which he has played, he's averaging 10 points, 4.5 assists, 2 rebounds, and shooting 36% from the field and 28% from behind the arc. He's terrible. He's trash. So now that means the Warriors get to go back to all reliable, overly depending and relying on Steph and Curry. But unfortunately, that ain't really working out the greatest for them either because Steph is 36 years old. The regression is very clear and evident. Even though, yes, for the totality of the season, he's been looking really solid, especially when you take into consideration how many minutes he's playing. He's averaging around 22 to 23 points, 6 assists, 5 rebounds, and shooting splits of 45, 41, and 94. And even as of late, some of these numbers across the board have been up over the past like 10 to 15 games. However, the devil certainly is in the details because these numbers don't really give a clear depiction on the true regression of Steph Curry because A, not only is the inconsistency just crazy. There was a stretch in this season where Curry would go out, give you about 26 points, next night only give you 2. Next night give you 31, night after that only give you 10. Then right after that, he's giving you 38 points, then right after that, only down to 22, then 11, then 30. I mean, it was every single night. It was ridiculous. But again, he's been better over the past couple of games, so you would assume that they would start winning, but no, that's not the case at all. And a huge reason why they start losing these games is because they're overly depending on Curry. The Warriors are coming out looking strong, Curry knocking out some shots, ball moving around. Then in the second half, the opposing team starts to think to themselves like, oh man, we can just double Curry, we can just blitz him. He's not going to be able to do anything. We just show a lot of body on him, put more athletic defenders, get the ball out of his hand, make sure he doesn't touch the ball when he's moving off ball. Just give all of our attention to Curry, double and triple team him, and then make somebody else beat us. And then the Warriors end up losing almost every single time. That is quite literally how they lost to the Kings. That's how they lost to the Toronto Raptors. That's how they keep blowing these leads, because Curry has to be all of their offense every single night. And it shows up in the on and off numbers, especially over the sample size we're referring to where they've been just terrible. So again, in the last 29 games, of which 24 Curry has participated in, the Warriors have an offensive rating of 115.7 when he is on the floor and a net rating of minus 0.5. So basically breaking even when Curry is on the floor. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that, again, in the fourth quarter, in the third, second half, they just start doubling, blitzing him, getting the ball out of his hands. But when Curry is not on the floor within the last 29 games, the Warriors' offensive rating drops all the way to 97. And they have a net rating of minus 11.3. That is ridiculous. Utter ridiculous. And it makes absolutely, positively no sense at all. And honestly, you can say the same thing about Draymond as well. When Draymond is on the floor in these last 29 games, of which he's only been able to play 19, again, this team doesn't look as good. Their offensive rating is only 110. Defensive rating, however, is 112. Net rating of minus 2.1. But when he's off the floor, offensive rating drops to 107. Defensive rating inflates to nearly 115. Net rating of minus 7.3. So this team is just overly depending on Curry and Draymond on really both sides of the floor. And the reason why this is so important is because what I'm starting to see is, again, this narrative and propaganda about players, in particular older players, making demands out of their front offices. To be fair, Jimmy Butler does get a little outrageous and crazy. I get that. But in essence, over the past like 10 to 15 years, the narrative has always been, hey, you sit down, you shut up, you play your contract, how dare you make demands, leave it up to the front office. Well, this is what it looks like. This is what happens when you have a franchise player who does not push the button, who does not force his team to make any trades, any deals, who does not put the fire under the butt of the front office. This is the results. And what makes it even more frustrating is when I not only hear fans, but fans of the Warriors say this as well. Like, they push this narrative like, oh, Curry got to do more, and Curry got to figure out a lineup, and Kuminga needs to be better, and B. Pies, and Gary Payton, and all these. No, they're not a problem. All of the things that you all complain about, especially on Twitter, that's not the problem. That is a symptom of the problem. Because the problem is you have a front office who decided not to do anything. A front office who overcomplicated the situation. A front office that put you in this situation to where you believe you have to depend on a 36-year-old to still lead this team. A front office that didn't give Steve Kerr a second option or a wing to go out there and play alongside with. A front office that decided to trade players that have panned out to be basically nothing. Because let's not forget, and it's very important that we don't, how we got here. Warriors lost in 2019. They lost Kevin Durant. Clay goes down dealing with the injury, so they decide to tank. They trade Kevin Durant over to the Nets, get D'Lo. Then they reshape D'Lo, package him over to Minnesota, get Wiggins in a draft pick. And because they tanked, they had a top pick from the tanking season and another top pick from the Wiggins trade. So they had some options, some choices that needed to be made. Do we package these picks together and go after immediate help, or do we draft for the future? They decided to go for the future. So that's option number one that didn't work out. Who did they select? Wiseman, Kuminga, and Moses Moody. Be very mindful that when they selected Wiseman, LaMelo Ball was still available. When they drafted Kuminga, Franz Wagner was still available. When they drafted Moses Moody, Trey Murphy was still available. And those who may think, Trey Murphy, that's a stretch low. No, it's not. You can go look up back then. There's literally reports saying that they were already working out Trey Murphy, so they could have had him. So there's a world where they could be running a lineup right now with LaMelo at the point, Steph Curry at the 2, Wiggins at the 3, Franz at the 4, Draymond at the 5, with Trey Murphy coming off the bench. Now, to be fair, it's kind of hard to believe that any team can swing on all 3 of those picks, but they also missed on all 3 of them as well. Yikes. And here we are now, a couple of years later, and we all know that they missed pretty badly because any of those 3, just one, you could have hit on one of them, just one. In this whole situation that you have right now, immediately would have changed. But oh no, it doesn't stop there, because this past offseason, as we know, they need to make some changes. They're trying to figure out what can they do. They need to restructure, because effectively they knew in the offseason they cannot overly depend on a 36-year-old small guard. Got to get a second option. Understandably so. You didn't want to play Klay Thompson. Oh, I get that. I understand that. Personally, I believe, hey, some of these players are owed a legacy contract, but hey, man, maybe that's just old-fashioned. Maybe that's not the best idea, especially in the new CBA. I get it. And you want to sit here and say you ain't got the money for it? Oh, I get it. But then news break that all of a sudden you got money for Paul George? You were going to give money to Paul George? Wow. Wowzers. Gets even better though. Over in Chicago's on their knees begging for somebody. Please take Zach LaVine. Please! Reports coming out saying that they'll even give you a draft pick to take him. You know who had an expiring contract, a contract that they could have unloaded and got somebody for immediate help? The Warriors, because he had Chris Paul. But instead of trading Chris Paul expiring over to the Bulls and maybe giving them something to make sure everything kind of mapped out, no, they just decided to just waive him. Let him walk for nothing. Do you know what Zach LaVine is doing this year? Oh, let me go ahead and tell you, because Zach LaVine, oh my goodness, what a treat he is, right? So far this season, Zach LaVine is averaging 24 points, 5 rebounds, 4.5 assists with the steal, shooting splits of 51, 45, 81. Best field goal percentage of his career, best 3-point percentage of his career, best true shooting percentage of his career. But oh wait, it gets even better, because recently when he gets, a little bit better in rhythm, gets his legs up under him, because he has been out for quite a while, LaVine has looked even better than that. Since January 1st, Zach is averaging 29 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists with the steal, shooting splits of 54, 46, 81. Sidebar, remember when many of you all told me, Zach LaVine not no top 25 player, though. What are you talking about? Jaylen Brown? Where's Jaylen Brown in the list? Why'd you got Zach LaVine over Jaylen Brown? He's a finals MVP. Ooh. I know many of you all haven't gone back to that video and try to right your wrongs. Don't worry, I got the screenshots. But no, that right there would have been a perfect second option to put next to Curry. And you effectively could have just gotten him for Chris Paul, because they were begging for somebody to take him. Yikes. But wait, it gets worse. And also be very mindful that Zach LaVine wasn't even the last option to get a second option next to Curry, because you also could have traded B-Pods, the bench player, the guy who's averaging 8-9 points, for Lauri Markkanen. But you decided not to do that as well. But wait, it gets worse. Shout out to Draymond, I love you, my brother. But that player that you clocked his game out of him, and he was just acting like he didn't know how to play basketball for a whole year last season, Jordan Poole, damn dog, even he having a career year. So far this season, Poole is averaging 22 points per game, career high, 5 assists, career high, 41% from 3, career high, while attempting 9 threes a game, career high. To be fair, this is on the worst team in the NBA, but it's still basketball being played at a very high level, and I know for a fact you would have loved to have that on your roster, but you decided to trade him for Chris Paul, who you then turn around and just waived and got nothing for him. This is the worst case scenario. And what makes it even more frustrating is that still to this day, despite the fact that there's a trade deadline right around the corner, I'm hearing Curry and Draymond push nonsense propaganda about we still got to stay packed. We can't make no trades. I want to make sure I leave the franchise and the organization in a better situation than I found it. Nigga, Curry, stop. Stop with the humble bullshit. Curry, when you came into the NBA, you drafted by the Warriors. That was a franchise that was deprived of practically any history. We believe Warriors, Run TMC, and last time before that, Rick Barry. I mean, my God, that's how far along the distance of success was for that organization. When Joe Lacob and them got involved, they bought that organization for $450 million. Fast forward to where we are right now, endless amount of success. Been to the finals God knows how many times. Broke a regular season record, 2 MVPs, multiple championships, moved into a new arena, and now they're saying that that organization is worth $8 billion. You turn that organization from $450 million to $8 billion. Brother, you've done more than enough. You've done more than enough. You're going to leave that organization in the best shape it has ever been in. But Curry, that's not your responsibility in the first place. I hate the fact that I'm watching one of the greatest players of all time, who still has a lot of game left in him, being wasted away. It's being wasted. There's nothing here. And so now we're in this awkward predicament where Draymond and Curry are saying, hey man, we all agree not to make any desperate trades because we don't come across as desperate and we don't want to put the franchise in a bad situation, even though the front office has now put us in this bad situation. But then also people don't want to then then talk about the elephant in the room, and that is, well, if you still want to compete, but you don't want to make any trades, I guess that means you need to be demanding one then. Curry and Draymond, y'all need to be demanding trades then. If the Warriors are a 500 ball club, you don't think they need to make any trades, but you still want to compete, well, nigga, what are you saying? It sounds like you're saying you need to be traded. That's what it sounds like. And for the people out there who criticize this ideology, I challenge you to answer this question. Is there ever going to be a point in time, because this whole future nonsense makes no sense to me, especially from a franchise that did not have any history of consistent success before Curry. Let me ask you this question. What is the likelihood that the Warriors would ever be able to piece together a roster that would have been as competent and as talented as the one that they could have built during the offseason with Curry, with Zach LaVine, with Andrew Wiggins, with Draymond? What is the likelihood that they'll ever be able to piece together a roster like that ever again? And I'm not talking peak Curry and peak Draymond. I'm talking about this version of Curry, this version of Draymond, this version of Wiggins, and this version of Zach LaVine. What is the odds that they will ever be able to piece together a roster like that? You worried about the future, but what's happening right now is better than what's more than likely was going to happen in the future anyway. But I mean, at this point, we got new general management anyway. It's not even the same GMs. It's not even the same decision makers. It's a new regime. Why are you trusting the new regime to do something for you that the old regime did? That makes no sense. So I don't know what y'all going to do, because this isn't fixable. The defense is still solid. I think the ceiling is fine, especially when Draymond is playing and Kuminga is also available as well. I'm not really concerned about that. But it's very, very clear. Offensively, this team ain't where it needs to be. Even if they bounce back, we're getting to the point in the season where you ain't got enough games left. You got the rest of January, February, March, and basically 3/4 of April to figure it out in a Western Conference that's so competitive that you probably have to win around 47 to 50 games just to be the 8th seed. And even if you end up getting the 8th seed in a play-in tournament, surprise, surprise, you got OKC in the first round. You're going nowhere fast. And it's a shame because this did not have to occur. And until next time, I'll see you all later. Peace.